All right. Can you hear me? All right. Hi, my name is Tae'lur Alexis. I'm a front-end engineer, and I work for Code.io, which is my own startup. And I'm also a freelancer. And I will be presenting on compassion-driven development, which is creating more accessible UI with React. So, what will you gain from this talk? I will be going over an overview of what is accessibility, brief overview of assistive technologies, how to audit a web page for accessibility, and how devtools can help that, and how it's a fundamental role in testing, some best practices for accessibility, and tips for creating an inclusive navigation experience, in particular like routing and what Reach Router is and how that benefits developers and ultimately users, as well as testing. All right. So what is accessibility? Accessibility is the practice of writing code that is accessible and inclusive for users with disabilities. So for those who have vision impairments, color contrast is a big issue. As well as like readability is very important when it comes to accessibility. And so accessibility is a priority, not an afterthought. And what I mean by that is that often when we developers are developing our applications, we don't always think of the diversity of our users and what issues they may have. And we don't think about how, in the beginning of the development process, we should be thinking about how to prevent errors in the future. So that's why I call it compassion-driven development, which is basically creating inclusive code from the beginning and not afterwards. So, what to look for in an accessible application from the perspective of the user. Here's a breakdown of the most common acronyms first, just in case for anyone who may not be aware. A11Y stands for accessibility. There's 11 letters between the A and the Y letters. ADA stands for the Americans with Disabilities Act. These are some acronyms and some concepts to keep in mind when you are going like deeper into accessibility, especially if you are developing for like government applications, which have stricter guidelines and standards to meet, as opposed to like regular private businesses. But they still stand to like, gain a lawsuit at any time, like how Beyonce currently is going through a lawsuit. And I believe one of the pizza chains in America, like Domino's, is going through the same thing. I believe it's Domino's. Yeah. And then HC stands for assistive technology. And assistive technology are basically the tools that we use or people with disabilities use to navigate our websites and to like interact with like the elements like on the page and everything. And it's what we developers use in order to kind of simulate the experience of those people with disabilities, because that is the most important thing, is to make sure that like as we're developing and as we're testing applications, we're able to kind of see from the perspective of the users that we're building for. I18N, that stands for internationalization. It's the process of developing an application that can be localized for languages. So translating like documentation. Like for instance, one of the talks that I wish I could have seen at a React conference was actually on like how like this person had like translate the documentation for like React into like different languages, and now that person's doing that for like I think Gatsby, which is pretty cool. Yeah, wanted to mention that in case like she sees this talk. And then WCAG, which is the guidelines. Those are the standard guidelines that we usually follow to determine like what is accessible and what is not, such as like color contrast if it meets like a certain ratio and stuff. All right, so tips on what to look for. So keyword accessibility. Can I navigate your site's forms, modules, which I misspelled, which it looks like it says modules. My bad. And then other features through keyboard only, because oftentimes users are only able to tab through. The users with disabilities. Resizable text. Can I zoom the text on your page or the content on your page to like 200% to 500%? That would be like the perfect zoom. And actually, a quick tip on that is using M units, or using like M over units, or not M over units, but like M units like over pixels when you're creating like your text and everything, when you're coding, because it actually, or also like break the layout or like the application. Color contrast. This feature especially helps those who may have vision impairment issues like color blindness, and the contrast ratio between text and background color should be 4 to 5 to 1. And so focus management, oh, and before I go on to the next thing, with color contrast, there's actually a helpful tool that I will be showing you all in order to like keep aware of what meets the color contrast guidelines for people with like vision impairments and stuff. Because usually, like for me, as someone who deals with accessibility like, on an everyday basis as a developer, I don't know everything. I usually have cheat sheets, and I usually like keep track of like, like bookmarks or like tools and extensions and everything, because I don't know everything like off the top of my head. If you were to ask me like what all of like the rules and guidelines and laws are with accessibility, I would not know, and I'd probably not get the job. But yeah, the next thing is focus management. Can I navigate and focus the users on where they need to be? For instance, menu navigation. When I am tabbing through your web page, am I able to skip to the content that I need? And then also, lastly, another thing to look for in general are there text alternatives for images, icons, and videos, just in case those like links break, or if I'm not even able to see those images or videos, can I still be able to like enjoy your site? Will I be able to know like what is going on? Oftentimes, when we are like inserting like images and stuff, like we don't always think about the importance of alts. We always think like, oh, well, the person can see, like they can just like kind of get a hint of like what's going on. And you know that images often have they often play like an important role in user experience. So it's very important to add the text alternatives to people who really can't see. So this is just like another slide on like just ways that you can like improve like accessibility, which includes just like adding like alt tags and everything like that, making everything like readable, the text readable. Which is, when I say like the text readable, I mean like both the font size and the color, and making sure that it doesn't blend into the page, and yeah. So some examples of assistive technology include screen readers. For a keyboard or screen reader, they tab through a web page, and that's how they navigate through your site, right? So like the main question is, when it comes to screen readers, is can we am I able to experience your site? And for Mac users, you would use VoiceOver, which is already built in. That's a screen reader that's already built in for Mac users. And then for Android users, you can use like Android accessibility in Chrome, which used to be called TalkBack. Yeah. And then for other testing with screen readers, you can use JAWS, IE11 or Edge. NVDA is what you would use on Windows, and it's free and open source. And you can use Orca on Linux, iOS, VoiceOver, and Safari. I highly encourage anyone who is trying to get better with accessibility to just start with like using screen readers. Even if you don't need to personally use screen readers to like navigate a website, if you are trying to test for users, I'm really trying to like reiterate that, like always trying to simulate the experience. That helps you get better. All right, so auditing. This is a practical and impactful way to learn how to write more compassion-driven UI components. So auditing is basically, for instance, like I use like Chrome Axe extension, which I'll be using in like a little like live demo, where it analyzes like a web page, and it goes over the different like errors that are found on the web page, and it categorizes it by importance. So it goes from warning to critical need. And so yeah, auditing is just like just auditing web pages for performance, for accessibility, and stuff like that. And one of the things you can use is Lighthouse, which is, I believe, on the Lighthouse, which is what we often use to like audit PWAs, like Gatsby sites or something, and that tests for like performance, accessibility, and PWA scoring, which PWAs essentially are accessible, which I'll go into that later. All right. So how to audit a web page. So you would render the page in the web browser, and then you see how the CSS and the JavaScript impacts the markup in the browser. Then it goes over like test controls with the keyboard, so you just test interactive things like buttons, links, inputs, text areas, which are really important parts of like an application, because that includes like user consent, getting the user data, and you need that. So using accessibility web extensions, there's Chrome X, which is the one I often use and which is the one I'll be using today. And there's also Microsoft Accessibility Insights. Feel free to check that out. They're both free and easy to use. Checking color contrast, there's actually a website called colorsafe.co, which provides ready-made color palettes that follow guidelines, just in case you don't, like if you don't like know like what color palette to use that will like meet those guidelines. Like there's literally like websites that like cater to that. And then also there's a little tool which I'll be going over. And Chrome DevTools for the color contrast as well. And then testing with screen readers. A good tip is to pair with someone who does use screen readers, because they are able to kind of provide like the perspective that you like need that you may not have. And then using magnification and zoom without breaking layouts. Like those are all the things that you're looking for when you are auditing a web page. Can I navigate the site with keyboard? Focus management. Can I be able to like focus and interact with the key things on the page, like buttons, links, inputs, text areas? Is the color contrast good? Is my text font or is my text color standing out enough from the background? Yeah. And then am I able to zoom in and out? Yeah, which is what I just went over. So yeah, using relative M or EM over pixels, that is a great way to kind of help with like magnification, so people can be able to like zoom in. All right. So here are some tips on using DevTools for accessibility testing. So Chrome Color Picker, which is in the Chrome DevTools, it allows you to inspect an element, pick the color of it, and provides contrast ratio, and you can drive the color to see how it changes the ratio. So one thing to note is that the ratio is always compared to 1. And then Axe Chrome extension, like I previously mentioned, that audits the web pages and identifies and provides accessibility errors and solutions, and it is prioritized by level of importance from warning to critical need, which is pretty cool. So when I mean like warning is a critical need, warning is basically like a way for you to like follow like a best practice, but it's not a dire need for you to change like that bit of code, but just a way like a warning, like a helpful like hint, like, oh, maybe if you want to make this like more accessible, you should do this. But then there's also the critical need ones, like, oh, you need to really change that because like you're not doing this right. Yeah. And Lighthouse tests for performance and network speed simultaneously, and uses the Axe Core API under the hood. And there's also Wave and No Coffee. So I'm going to go over a few websites, if I can. Let's see. All right. So I'm going to go over 5 websites, if I have enough time. Wikipedia, Beyonce's website, Jerome Parker, Netflix, and Udemy. So if you go over Wikipedia, and if I refresh this page, wait, you can't see it. Oh no. I can't. I'm trying to have them be able to see it. Wait, that shows the MD.
Oh, is that the wrong one?
Yeah.
Can I do the whole thing?
Yeah, that's what I need, the whole thing. Yeah.
Give it up for display. Here we go.
Okay. All right. Hold on. It's It's not showing on my, sorry. Y'all can see the website, now I can't. Yeah.
Oh god. Okay.
Should I just
Fingers
skip
crossed.
that portion?
No,
Maybe?
we
Oh,
got it.
we got it?
Don't worry.
Okay.
Don't worry.
Thank you.
We got it.
Thank you. Okay, all right. So we're about to audit this website called Netflix, which you may have heard about. So if you go on inspect, if you right click, go on inspect, and if you click the arrow, go to X. All right, so now it's going to analyze the web page. Let me see. Let's make it viewable at least a little bit. Wait, let's go here. All right. So best practice, it found one. It found one best practice. Okay, yeah, that's better. If you're able to see, which I hope you are, it literally only found like one error. And, oh wait, actually no. There's 50 that needs review. So that's not good for the Netflix site. And as you can see, it goes over like the different issues. Like if you click like one by one, it'll show the issue and like what you should do. But for instance, this right here, they're not sure that is an issue because element's background color cannot be determined due to a background gradient. Because Netflix uses the background gradients, it kind of confuses things. So, all right, so that's just one example. So that's the Netflix page. Let's go over to Beyonce's site. Let's see. All right. So if we inspect, oh, shout out, go watch Queen and Slim in theaters now. All right, let's try to run the X extension here. All right, so it found 4 violations because Beyonce's site is always full of violations. There. Stands do not get me. All right, zooming and scaling must not be disabled. So they disabled zooming. To solve the violation, you need to enable it with the meta tag or on the meta tag. And then another violation they found is ID attribute value must be unique. They found 3 instances of this particular error. And it's so helpful, like this like Chrome like extension is, because it literally like it shows you like where your error is, like where you went wrong, the level of like concern that it is, and like how you solve that. Like that's perfect. Like that is a great way to start learning like accessibility. It's just like from literally errors. Like that's how I learned because I used to audit like a bunch like my old like projects and stuff, and then I would see like all the errors that I had, and like that's what I learned. I used to like keep like a little like sheet of like all the errors and stuff and like the solutions, and kind of like remember like that. Yeah. And the next one is my best friend, Jerome. All right. Let's see. No thanks. All right. So go to inspect. All right. If you run the Axe Chrome extension on this page, wow. Oh, I'm putting my best friend like under the bus. I'm so sorry. Wow. Okay, Jerome, if you're watching this, you have 139 violations, and like as your best friend, I'm very, very mad. Okay, and so take note, Jerome, when you're like watching this. So there's 139 violations. There's 10 best practice warnings and everything. So like those are things that you don't really need to like take care of, but those violations you really have to. Such as elements must have sufficient color contrast, which like I said, you can use the color picker on the Chrome DevTools, and you can kind of like click and drag, and like you figure out like, oh, like which one like meets like the perfect like ratio, and like that would solve it like instantly. Another one is frames must have title attribute. Form elements must have labels. Labels are very important. Yeah. All right, and then lastly, I'm going to audit the Udemy site. Okay. So analyze. Okay. Congratulations, no accessibility violations found. Like, that's perfect. Go, Udemy. Hey. All right, that's pretty cool. So they must be following best practices and everything. All right. So, oh no. Okay, wait. Now presents. Okay. All right. So best practices for accessible routing. So with client-side routing, that's dynamically mapping URLs with views in JavaScript. So what comes to play when it comes to like accessible routing is focus management, which is what I've been like trying to reiterating like throughout the talk, is that focus management is very important. It's being able to focus the user on where they need to be and when they're tabbing through your website. So a good tip is to add a skip link. So that sends the focus to new content. And so like an example would be like if you have a menu and if you create like a little skip link that's small enough for those with magnification issues can like focus on and everything without breaking the layout when you're like zooming in. That announces to the screen reader to skip to a certain link. So yeah, Reach Router is something that you may already know about. I believe it's 70% smaller bundle size than React Router. It's automatically built into Gatsby, and it manages the focus of your app on route transitions. It's just a pretty like seamless like transition. It's nothing that you have to really do about it. It's like already built into that particular library. And then there's announcements with live regions. And with live regions, it announces to the user like the importance of a certain like message. Like, do you want to interrupt the user, or what? Not what the user is saying, but what the screen reader is saying to the user, or should you wait? And if there's role of status, which waits before making an announcement. And yeah. I believe. Oh, okay. All right. So a deep dive into Gatsby's accessibility practices. And this is not just about Gatsby. This is about PWAs in general. PWAs are progressive web apps, are basically websites that are built with speed, network capabilities in mind and everything. And so ways to like make your PWA more accessible is to add in like offline support, like service workers that run in the background and it caches your files for an offline experience, so then your users can use it offline. Because for a lot of us around the world, like network performance, like maybe like on the lower side, and so being able to like still navigate and access like your web pages like when we are offline or like without like a data connection is like really important. It's just a great way to be like more thoughtful to your users. Yeah. And you would audit, of course, PWAs with Lighthouse, which is the official testing tool for it. And just briefly, I'm gonna briefly go over testing. All right, so like with like unit testing, that's just testing like bits of code in your application. It's testing for component level concerns. Headless, it's headless, so that means it doesn't render in the DOM. And then it tests code in isolation that doesn't hit the network or depending on other component, and passes in inputs and asserting the outcome specific to what you're testing for. And then the purpose of writing tests in general, just to summarize, it's just like a way for you to be able to like test like little like components and just testing for accessibility. For instance, like toggling like ARIA states, is it disabled or is it enabled? Text alternatives, like are the icons and the chat widgets and everything, do they all have proper text alts and everything? And then also to keep in mind is to write tests focused on outcome rather than implementation. That's for like any tests, and the reason being is because when you're writing for focus on the outcome, that means that it can be like regardless of like what like framework or like what like implementation that you use, like the test will not be affected, and so your test will still pass and will not break. It will not break your code. And then a best practice when it comes to like writing tests for me is that I often associate like the test files like with the associating component in its like own folders like for each component and everything, just for like organization. Do with that like what you will. So yeah, and then there's integrations and end-to-end testing. That tests for like color contrast, framework flexibility, so you can it's flexible when it comes to like frameworks, so it doesn't have to be with just React, or it could be like with like Angular or whatnot. Continuous integration. There's not too much that I know about continuous integration. I do know that it is possible. I believe there is a article by Marcy Sutton, which I'll link at the end, which goes over continuous integration for accessibility. So yeah, and then automation tests. Tests can catch roughly 30 to 50% of accessibility issues depending on rule set, and screen readers can't be automated, just so you know. And user testing. The importance of user testing, of course, is you're able to get like the best feedback, because what we care about, when it comes to accessibility is the opinions, the thoughts, and perspectives of our users, especially those with disabilities. And so if you're able to find someone that does have a disability and is able to kind of give you like constructive feedback on like what you could do better, and is able to kind of like go through like a website for you, they're able to kind of like provide like different perspectives you may not have, and they may have questions and concerns that probably didn't come across your mind when you were going through your development process and everything. And then linting, so like there's a plugin called ESLint plugin JSX A1Y. I believe you can use that like for GAT applications, stuff like that. And it tests for quality live in a file or on a live in a file or on a commit. So it provides like those like little annoying warnings when you're using ESLint on like what you could like do better, and it catches errors early, because that's really the important thing, is to catch errors so that you're able to ship bug-free code to your users. You can also change like you can also like reconfigure the rules so it doesn't throw like unnecessary errors to you. And then the limitation for the plugin is that it's only used for sites that use ESLint and JSX like Gatsby or React or Create React app. So yeah. That is it. I hope you enjoyed it.